Hey class, well welcome to our next reading. We skipped a bunch of lines here, and I just wanted to let you know that basically we pick up here. We have Patroclus has already talked to Nestor, and things continue to go badly for the Achaeans. The parts that we skipped are a bunch of drama between the gods, and we switched scenes. But now we're coming back to the fighting, and we pick it up pretty much in the same spot we left. Things are not going well for the Achaeans, and we're going to pick it up right here with it. So follow along with me, if you don't mind. So we're going to start right up here on line 696. Now, once again, a grim battle was fought by vessels. You would say that they faced each other unbruised, unbruised, unwearied in the fighting from the speed in which they went for each other. So, basically, you would say that they're not injured because the fighting is so fierce, okay? This was the thought in each as they struggled on. The Achaeans thought they could not get clear of the evil, but must perish, while the heart inside each of the Trojans was hopeful to set fire to the ships and kill the fighting men of Achaia, right? So the Trojans have pushed all the way back to the ships. The Achaeans feel like they're doomed. The Trojans are hopeful. That's basically what it's saying there. With such thoughts in mind, they stood up to fight with each other. Hector caught hold of the stern of a grand, fast-running, seafaring ship that once had carried Protesilaus to Troy and did not take him back to the land of his father. So this ship is not going to make it back. We'll see why in a second. It was around this ship now that the Achaeans and the Trojans cut each other down at close quarters, nor any longer had patience for the volleys exchanged from the bows of the javelins, but stood up close to each other, matching their fury, and fought with their battle with sharp hatchets and axes, with great swords and leaf-headed pikes. And many magnificent swords were scattered along the ground, black-thonged, heavy-hilted, and sometimes dropping from hands, some glancing from shoulders of men as they fought. So the ground was black with blood. Now, pikes are kind of a spear, but note here that we're not using spears. This is not long-range battle. They are in the thick of it. Hector would not let go of the stern of the ship where he had caught hold of it, but gripped the stern post in his hands and called to the Trojans. So here you go. This is Hector talking here. He says, "Bring fire, give single voice to the clamor of battle. Now Zeus has given us a day worth all the rest of them, the ships capture, the ships that came here in spite of the gods' will and have visited much pain upon us. By our counsel's cowardice, who would not let me fight by the grounded ships, though I wanted to, but held me back in restraint and curbed in our fighters. But Zeus of the wide brows, even though he fouled our intentions, comes now himself to urge us and give us encouragement." So he's like, listen, it's the will of the gods that we're doing this right now. The will of Zeus specifically. Let's go. So he spoke, and they thereby came on harder against the Argives. Their volleys were too much for Aias, who could hold no longer his place, but had to give back a little, expecting to die there, even back to the 7-foot midship, and gave up the high deck of the balanced ship. There he stood and waited for them. So he had to give up the upper deck. He's backed off on the ship a little bit. He's a little bit further back on the ship, and they're fighting for the large ship. So things are really, really not looking good right now. There he stood and waited for them with his pike, always beat off any Trojan who carried persistent fire from the vessels. He kept up a terrible bellowing and urged the Danaans, "Friends and fighting men of the Danaans, henchmen of Ares, be men now, dear friends, remember your furious valor. Do we think that there are others who stand behind to help us? Have we some stronger wall that can rescue the men from perdition? That's danger. We have no city built strong with towers lying near us, within which we could defend ourselves and hold up off this host that matches us. We hold position on this plain of the close-armored Trojans, bent back against the sea and far from the land of our fathers. Salvation's light is in our hands' work, not the mercy of battle." He spoke and came forward with his sharp spear, raging for battle, and whenever some Trojan crashed against the hollow ships with burning fire, who sought to wake the favor of Hector, Aias would wait for him and then stab with a long pike. and so from close up wounded 12 in front of the vessels. So Aias, I put here, Aias seems to be holding off the Trojans almost by himself. I mean, that's not true, but he is the one who is there holding them, right? He calls them, he says, if we don't want to die, this is our time. We have to do this now. So while all this is happening, kind of like in book 11, we have something going on with Patroclus and Achilles. So this is book 16, and you can pick this up here. So they fought on both sides for the sake of the strong benched vessel. So they're all fighting during this time. Meanwhile, Patroclus came to the shepherd of the people, Achilles, and stood by him and wept warm tears. And here's what his tears were like a spring dark running, that down the face of a rock impassable drips its dim water, and the swift-footed, brilliant Achilles looked on him with pity. Okay, so Patroclus comes crying to Achilles, and he spoke to them and addressed them in winged words. Here's what Achilles says. Why, then, are you crying like some poor little girl, Patroclus, who runs after her mother and begs to be picked up and carried, and clings to her dress and holds her back when she tries to hurry, and gazes tearfully into her face until she's picked up? You are like such a one, Patroclus, dropping these soft tears. Could you have some news to tell for me or the Myrmidons? Have you and nobody else received some messages from Thea? Yet they tell me Actor's son Meniotus lives still, and Aeacus' son Peleus lives still among the Myrmidons. If either of these died, we should take it hard. Or is that the Argives you are mourning over, and how they are dying against the hollow ships by reason of or is it the Argives that you are mourning over, and how they are dying against the hollow ships by reason of their arrogance? Tell me, do not hide your mind, and we shall both know. So, couple things that Achilles is saying here. First of all, Achilles is basically calling him a crybaby, and he says, why are you crying? Okay, he says, our people, these are the people here, okay, right here from Thea, and right, those, I forgot to highlight Patroclus, right, they are well, right, our own family is safe, okay, and he's saying, why are you crying for the Achaeans, okay, who are dying by the hollow ships because of their arrogance? He's talking about Agamemnon's arrogance. And you can see here that he really has no, he just doesn't feel any sorrow for them right now. There's no mercy or thought in his heart for the other Achaeans, which makes sense because he's not doing anything. Okay, so in response, Patroclus, the writer, you answered. So Patroclus answers, son of Peleus, far the greatest the Achaeans, Achilles, do not be angry. Such grief has fallen upon the Achaeans, for all those before the bravest in battle are lying up among the ships with arrow and spear wounds, right? So all of our best fighters are wounded. He says, the son of Tydeus, strong Diomedes, was hit by an arrow. We already know this. We already read this. Odysseus has a pike wound. Agamemnon, the spear-famed, and Eurypylus has been wounded in the thigh with an arrow. And over these, the healers skilled in medicine are working to cure their wounds. But you, Achilles, who can do anything with you? May no such anger take me as this that you cherish. In other words, make it so I'm not like you. Cursed courage! What other man born hereafter shall be advantaged unless you beat aside from the Argives this shameful destruction? Pitiless! The writer Peleus was never your father, nor Thetis was your mother, but it was a gray sea that bore you on the towering rocks, so sheer the heart in you is turned from us. This is a great diss right here. Actually, I haven't highlighted it, but I gotta highlight it for you. This is so great. Peleus wasn't your father, neither was Thetis your mother. You were born from the towering rocks because your heart is a sheer cliff that is turned away from us. And it's done it. The cliff, in my mind, the sheerness this is a suddenness, right? You were with us and now you're against us. So I'll just put that down. Achilles is like a stone cliff. And of course, with the stone cliff, it means that he has no heart, no passion, no softness. But if you are drawing back from some prophecy known in your heart and by Zeus, by the way, note here, this is exactly Nestor's words, so I'm going to say this really quickly from Book 11. This is almost exactly. And by Zeus's will, your honored mother has told you something. Then send me out at least, and let the rest of the Myrmidon people follow me. And I may be a light given to the Danaans. Give me your armor to wear on my shoulders into the fighting, so perhaps the Trojans might think I am you and give away from their attack, and the fighting sons of the Achaeans get wind again after hard work. There is little breathing space in the fighting. We, unwearied, might with a mere cry pile men wearied back upon their city and away from the ships and their shelters. So, basically, this is exactly, I put here, this is the exact words of Nestor's, or almost very, very close, if it's not exact. And so we move on. And so he spoke, supplicating in his great innocence. This was his own death and evil destruction he was entreating. Note that this is foreshadowing. If you guys remember foreshadowing is where the story gives a hint of what is to come. So we know that Patroclus is going to die. But now, deeply troubled, swift-footed Achilles answered him, Ah, Patroclus, illustrious, what is this you are saying? I have not any prophecy in mind that I know of. There is no word from Zeus, my honored mother has told me. But this thought comes as a bitter sorrow to my heart and my spirit when a man tries to foul one who is his equal. So this is still about Agamemnon, to take back a prize of honor because he goes in greater authority. This is a bitter thought to me. My desire has been dealt with roughly. The girl, once again, the girl the sons of the Achaeans chose out for my honor, and I won her with my own spear and stormed the strong fenced city, is taken back out of my hands by powerful Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, as if I were some dishonored vagabond, some street urchin. Still, we will let all this be a thing of the past, and it was not in my heart to be angry for either. Yet I have said I would not give over to my anger until that time came when the fighting, with all its armor, came down on ships. So he can't go, right? Because the fighting hasn't gotten to his ships yet. So do you draw my glorious armor about your shoulders. Lead the Myrmidons, whose delight it is to battle in the fighting, if truly the black cloud of the Trojans has taken position strongly about our ships. And the others, the Argives, are bent back against the beach of the sea, holding only a narrow division of land, and the whole city of Trojans has descended upon them boldly, because they do not see the face of my helmet glaring close. Or else they would run and cram full of dead men the water courses, if powerful Agamemnon treated me kindly. If only Agamemnon had treated him kindly. Now the Argives fight for their very encampment, for the spear ranges not now in the hands of the son of Tydeus, Diomedes, to beat destructions aside from the Danaans, nor have I heard the voice of the son of Atreus crying from his hated head. Now, I haven't heard Argives. No, but the voice of murderous Hector calling to the Trojans crashes about my ears. He does hear Hector with their war cry, and they hold the entire plain as they beat the Achaeans in battle. But even so, Patroclus, beat the bane aside from our ships. Fall upon them with all your strength. Let them do the fires blazing, and let them not with fires blazing inflame our ships, and take away our desired homecoming. Okay, so go, take my armor, beat them away from the ships. And there's a big but. See this but? Okay, there's a big but here. But obey to the end this word I put upon your attention, so that you can win. For me, great honor and glory in the sight of all Danaans. So they will bring back to me the lovely girl and give me shining gifts in addition. When you have driven from them the ships, come back. Although later the thunderous Lord Hera might grant you the winning of glory, you must not set your mind on fighting the Trojans, whose delight is in battle without me. So you will diminish my honor. So note here, don't pursue the Trojans past the ships. What's interesting here is, at least initially, the reason why is so that he doesn't diminish Achilles' honor. I mean, come on. Really? Okay, well, that's the way he wants to put it. Let's see if we can get any other reasons here as well. You must not, in the pride and fury of flying, go on slaughtering the Trojans and lead the way against Ilion, for fear that one of the everlasting gods in Olympus might crush you. Oh, so now I care about you. That's so nice. That's so nice. Okay. Don't diminish my honor, but by the way, I care about you a little bit too. Apollo, who works from afar, loves these people dearly. You must turn back once you bring the light of salvation to the ships and let the others go on fighting in the flat land. Father Zeus, Athena, and Apollo, if only not one of the Trojans could escape destruction, not one of the Argives, but you and I could emerge from the slaughter so that we two alone could break Troy's hallowed coronal. Okay? The word coronal here means crown or head. So we're literally means break Troy's head or dethrone Troy. So conquer Troy. Now as these two were talking thus to each other, meanwhile the volleys were too much for Aias. Aias, always doing protecting, always getting beat back. But barely getting beat back, right? Who could no longer hold no longer his place. The will of Zeus beat him back, and the proud Trojans with their spears around his temples and the shining helmet clashed horribly under the shower of strokes, and he was hit constantly on the strong wrought cheek pieces, and his left shoulder was tiring from always holding up the big glittering shield. Yet they could not beat him out of his place. I love Aias. Even though they piled their missiles upon him, his breath became ever hard and painful, and the sweat ran pouring down his body from every limb, and he could find no means to catch his breath. But evil was piling on. I put here Aias is barely holding on. Tell me now, you muses, who have your homes on Olympus, how the fire was first thrown upon the ships of the Achaeans. So whenever you say the muses, it's almost like, think about like the narrator voice, right? And now, right? Okay, tell me now, you muses. Okay, how fire was first thrown on the ships of the Achaeans. Hector stood up close to Aias and hacked at the ash spear with his great sword, striking behind the socket of the spearhead. So he lops off the head of the spear. Okay, and slashed it clean away, so that Telamonian Aias shook there in his hand a lopped spear, while far away from the bronze spearhead fell echoing to the ground. And Aias knew in his blameless heart, and shivered for knowing it, how this was the god's work, how Zeus, high thundering, cut across the intention of all his battle, how he planned that the Trojans should conquer. He drew away out of the missiles, and the Trojans threw weariless fire on the fast ship, and suddenly the quenchless flame streamed over it. So the fire was at work at the ship's stern, but Achilles struck his hands against both his thighs. That's like saying, here we go, and called to Patroclus. Rise up, illustrious Patroclus, rider of horses. I see now the ravening fire goes roaring over our vessels. They must not get our ships, so we cannot run away in them. Get on your armor, faster, I will muster our people. So Achilles calls Patroclus, and he calls them to go. So he spoke, and Patroclus was helming himself in the bronze that glittered. First he placed along his legs the beautiful greaves. Greaves, remember, are the parts against the shins, linked with a silver fastening to hold the greaves at the ankle. Afterward, he girt himself with the chest at the corselet. We've talked about all these armor pieces, starry and elaborate at the swift-footed Achaeans. And across his shoulders he slung the sword with nails of silver. So Patroclus puts on Achilles' armor, a bronze sword, and above it the great shield, huge and heavy. Over his mighty head he set the well-fashioned helmet, with the horsehair crest and the plumes knotted terribly above it. He took up 2 powerful spears that fitted in his hand's grip. Not only did he take up the spear of the blameless Achaeans, huge, heavy, and thick. Achaeans, by the way, is another word for Achilles, which no one else of all the Achaeans could handle, but Achilles alone knew how to wield it. The Pelion ash spear with Chiron, that's his trainer, had brought to his father from high on Pelion to be the death for fighters. Patroclus ordered Automedon rapidly to harness the horses. That's the driver, for Achilles, a man he honored most after Achilles, breaker of horses, who stood by most staunchly by him against the fury of the fighting. For him, Automeon led the fast-running horses underneath the yoke, Xanthos and Balios. Okay, these are Achilles' horses, who tore with the wind's speed. Horses stormy Pardarge, I forgot to do that. Once conceived of the west wind and bore as she grazed in the middle beside the swirl of the ocean. So literally, these stallions were conceived of the west wind. So, I mean, if you have the wind's horses, what does that mean? They're fast, right? That's what it would mean. He, mortal as he was, ran us beside the immortal horses. All right. But Achilles, meanwhile, went to the Myrmidons and arrayed them. And here we have one of those beautiful similes, okay? In all their war gear along the shelters, and they as wolves who tear flesh raw, in whose hearts the battle fury is tireless, who've brought down the great horned stag in the mountains and then fed on him until the jowls of every wolf run with blood. That's a pretty sight. And then going all in a pack to drink from a spring of dark running water, lapping with their lean tongues along the black edge of the surface, and belching up the clotted blood in the heart of each one as a spirit untremulous without fear, but their bellies are full and groaning. Such the lords of the Myrmidons and their men of council around the brave henchmen of the swift-foot Achates swarmed, and among them was standing warlike Achilles, and urged the fighting men with their shields and horse. So the men here they're like wolves, right? They are full, but furious. Right? They're going to satiate. They're going to feed themselves on blood and gore. It's a beautiful picture here. 50 were the fast-running ships wherein Achilles, the beloved of Zeus, had led his men to Troy, and in each one were 50 men. All right. His companions in arms at the rowing benches. And he had made 5 leaders among them. Okay, and then here we have the leaders of men, and I'm not going to go through all of them. Okay, we have, you can just see here, we have Menestos is one, then we have Eudoros. You can read the descriptions, okay? For example, Eudoros is the son of Hermes, right? So there's little backstories for each of these. So if you want to read them, they're fine. The third was Pisardros, okay, the fourth by Phoenix, and the fifth, Phoenix, which we've already met, and the fifth, Alcimedon. And so after Achilles gave them to the stations all in good order, beside their leaders, he laid his stern injunction, this is word or speech, upon them. Myrmidons, let not one of you forget these mutterings, those threats that beside the running ships you made the Trojans in all time of my anger. And it was you who I were blaming, as, hard son of Peleus, your mother nursed you on Gaul, you have no pity to keep your companions here by the ships unwilling. So he's saying that his men have complained that he won't go fight, right? We should go back home again then, in our seafaring vessels, now that this wretched anger has befallen on your spirit. So why don't we just go home, because you're so angry? Often you would gather in groups and so mutter against me, and now is shown a great work of that fighting that you long for. Then let each man take heart of strength and go fight the Trojans. He's like, fine, then go. This is your time. So he spoke and stirred the spirit and strength in each man and their ranks as they listened to the king, pulling closer together. And here's another one of those similes again, right? I should actually put it in blue, shouldn't I? Hold on. Okay, so here's the simile about the battle formation. And as a man builds a solid wall with stones set close together for the rampart of high house keeping out in the force of the wind, so close together were the helms and the shields massive in battle. For shield leaned upon shield, and helmet upon helmet, and man against man, and the horsehair crests along the horns of the shining helmets touched as they bent their heads. So dense were they formed together, and before them the 2 men in their armor, Patroclus and Automedon, both of them in single fury. So here I have a picture of the... Yeah, I guess I can do that. Here I have a picture of the formations, right? And this is the formation it's talking about. This is what is called a phalanx formation. And you can see here a good Greek formation is going to have people very close together, right? With their shields by each other. And so basically it's saying these myrmidons were good fighters, right? They're good fighters. Everything is nice and tight and close. All right, let's zoom back out. All right, there we go. Okay, I think we're about here. Both of them in one single fury to fight in front of the Myrmidons. But meanwhile, Achilles went off to his shelter and lifted the lid from a lovely elaborate war chest, which Thetis the silver-footed had put in his ship to carry, so his mom gave it to him, and filled it fairly with tunics and mantles to hold the wind from a man, with fleecy blankets. Inside this lay a wrought goblet, nor did any other man drink the shining wine, nor did Achilles pour from it to any other god, but only to Zeus. So this is a special goblet for offerings to Zeus. He took this now out of the chest and cleaned it with sulfur first, and afterwards washed it out in the bright running water, and washed his own hands, and poured the shining wine into the goblet, and stood in the middle front court and prayed, and poured the wine, looking the sky, not unseen by Zeus, who delights in thunder. So this goblet's only used for Zeus, and Achilles has a prayer here. He says, "Hi Zeus, Lord of Dodona, Paslegian, living afar off, brooding over the wintry Dodona, your prophets about you living, the Selai who sleep on the ground with feet unwashed." These are the priests of Zeus. "Hear me, as one time before when I prayed to you, you listened and did me honor." He's talking about an old time when Zeus answered his prayer and smote strongly the host of Achaeans. So one more time bring to pass the wish that I pray for. For see, I myself am staying where the ships are assembled, but I send out my companion and many Myrmidons with him to fight. Let glory, Zeus of the wide brows, go forth with him. He's praying for Patroclus, right? To fight. Go forth with him. Make brave the heart inside his breast, so that even Hector, who will find out whether our henchman knows how to fight his battles by himself, whether his hands rage invincible only those times when I myself go into the grind of the war god. But when he has beaten back from the ships their clamorous onset, then let him come home back to me in the running ships unwounded. Please let Patroclus come back to me unwounded, with all his armor and with the companions who fight close to him. So he spoke, and Zeus the council heard him. The Father granted him one prayer and denied him the other, right? Zeus answered only half his prayer. Okay? Here's the part that he does, that Patroclus would be back to fighting assault on the vessels. He allowed, but he refused to let him come back safe out of the fighting. Once again, this is foreshadowing that Patroclus is going to die. When Achilles had poured the wine and prayed to Zeus' father, hold on, what does that mean? I just read a few times, I think it just means Father Zeus. He went back into the shelter and stowed the cup in the chest and came out to stand in front of the door, with the desire in his heart still to watch the grim encounter of the Achaeans and the Trojans. Now they, who were armed in the company of the great-hearted Patroclus, went onward, until in high confidence they charged the Trojans. The Myrmidons, so here we go, here's another simile, came streaming out like wasps at the wayside when little boys have gone the habit of making them angry by always teasing them when they live in their house by the roadside. Yeah, I would be running. Silly boys, they do something that hurts many people, and if some man who travels on the road happens to pass them and stirs them unintentionally, they in their heart of fury come swarming out, each one of them in his place, to fight for their children. So it doesn't matter if you're the boys or somebody passing by, these wasps are coming for everyone. Silly boys. Wasps scare me. If wasps are coming for you, you run. In heart and in fury, like these Myrmidons streaming, came out of their ships with tireless clamor arising, and Patroclus called afar in a great voice to his companions. So here's Patroclus' speech. Myrmidons, companions of Peleus' son Achilles, be men now, dear friends. Remember your furious valor. We must bring honor to Peleus' son, far the greatest of the Argives. By the ships we, even the henchmen who fight beside him. So Atreus' son, wide-ruling Agamemnon, who recognized his madness, that he did no honor to the best of the Achaeans. And note here, even Patroclus here, he ends with, bring Achilles honor. He's a good friend. All right? So they fell upon the Trojans in a pack. So he spoke and stirred the spirit and strengthened his band. They fell upon the Trojans in a pack, and about them the ships echoed terribly to the roaring Achaeans. But the Trojans, when they saw the powerful son of Meniodas himself and his henchmen with him with the glare of their war gear, and their heart was stirred in them, and the battalions were shaken in the expectation that by the ships swift-footed Pelion, that's Achilles, had thrown away his anger and chosen friendship. So he's now friends again with the Achaeans. Then each man looked about him in a way to escape sheer death. The Trojans are afraid. Patroclus was the first man to make cast with the shining spear, straight through the middle fighting, where most are stricken. Beside the stern of the ship, great hard Protosilios, and struck Prosecum, I'm just going to butcher these words, Pyracames, who had led the lords of Paeonion, the horses from Amydon, and the wide waters of Axios. He struck him in the right shoulder, so he dropped in the dust groaning on his back, and his Paeonian companions about him scattered, for Patroclus drove fear into all of them when he cut down their leader, the best of them in battle. He drove them from the ships and put out the fire that was blazing. All right, so the fire's out. And that ship was left half burnt as it was, and the Trojans scattered in terror and unearthly noise, and the Danaans streamed back along the hollow ships, and clamor incessant rose up. As when, here's another simile, as when from the towering height of a great mountain Zeus, who gathers the thunderflash, stirs the cloud dense upon it, and all the high places of the hills are clear, and the shoulders out jutting in the deep ravines, and endless bright air spills from the heavens. So when the Danaans had been beaten from their ships, the ravening fire, they got breath for a little, but there was no check in the fighting. For the Trojans, under the attack of the warlike Achaeans, had not yet turned their faces and run away from the black ships. They stood yet against them, but gave away from the ships under pressure. So the Trojans are not running away yet, but they back off. All right, we're going to skip this next part. There's a bunch of killing going on, and you can read this. There's a bunch of names and a bunch of killing. Okay? The Achaeans are killing a bunch of people. We're going to head right down here to the bottom of 350. So these lords of the Danaans killed each his own man. That's what up here. They as wolves make havoc among the lambs and young goats in their fury, catching them out of the flocks when the sheep separate in the mountains. This is another simile, isn't it? Okay. And through the thoughtlessness of the shepherd, and the wolves, seeing them, suddenly snatch them away, and they have no heart for fighting. So the Danaans ravaged the Trojans, and these remembered the bitter sound of terror and forgot their furious valor. So the Trojans flee. And I know we don't have to do this last little bit, but I like this a little bit, so I'm going to do it. But the great Aias was trying forever to make a great spear cast at bronze-helmed Hector, but he in his experience of fighting with his broad shoulders huddled underneath, so this is Hector in his experience, huddled under the bull's hide shield, and kept watching always the whistle of arrows and the crash of spears thrown. He knew well how the strength of the fighting shifted against him, but even so stood his ground to save his steadfast companions. So once again, this is why I love Hector, right? He's kind of like Aias, okay? Hector stays to help, even though he understands that the tide has turned. All right, we'll pick it up from here. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.